Thank you for joining us for History Underwater, Preserving Undersea Heritage, the final webinar of our 2025 Preserve the Past, Build for the Future webinar series. We are recording this session and it will be made available later on our YouTube channel. Also, if you need closed captioning, please click on the caption button. I'm Lynn Richmond, Acting Director of the Office of Communications, Education and Outreach for the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. Beneath the surface of the seas lies a treasure trove of archaeological wonders that tell untold stories of America's past. Today, we will hear about the cutting-edge techniques used to protect these fragile underwater resources and why their preservation is crucial to uncovering a more complete and vibrant picture of our nation's history. We have assembled an excellent panel, and we hope this webinar will educate you about this interesting aspect of historic preservation and maybe even inspire you to consider underwater archaeology as a career. Just a quick word about the ACHP. The ACHP is an independent federal agency that promotes the economic, educational, environmental, and cultural values of historic preservation and advises the President and Congress on national historic preservation policy. The ACHP is the only federal agency whose sole mission is historic preservation. A large part of the ACHP's work is overseeing Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which requires federal agencies and those receiving federal funding or federal licensure to consider historic preservation when carrying out an undertaking. We're excited about today's guests. They are William T. Hoffman, who is the Chief Historian at the Office of Marine Sanctuaries at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Susan Langley, who is Maryland State Underwater Archaeologist and Director of the Maryland Maritime Archaeology Program within the Maryland State Historic Preservation Office. Hi, Susan and Willie. And Jay Hagler, who is on the Board of Directors of Diving with a Purpose, a nonprofit involved in underwater historic preservation. Thank you for joining us, all of you. Before we begin, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat box. Once the speakers have given their presentations, we'll call on you to pose your questions to our panelists. So we can begin now with William Hoffman. Welcome.
Well, yeah, hello. Thanks for inviting me to participate. It's really, truly exciting to see the interest in underwater and maritime archaeology. I'm really just blown away by the number of participants. So this is really cool. I'm glad to be a part of it. And again, thanks to Lynn and the ACHP folks for coordinating and putting this together. And I feel really just honored to be here with Jay and Susan and they're folks that I respect and really have so much to learn from. So glad to be here and get to hear what they have to say. Just to introduce myself a little bit, my name is Willie Hoffman. My title is Chief Historian, but I'm really an archaeologist. And in this role, I help coordinate the Maritime Heritage Program for NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. And I'm showing you a picture of this vessel here on the first slide. This is the Lake Guardian. It's an EPA, an Environmental Protection Agency research vessel that's based in the Great Lakes, and it also happens to be my temporary home. So we're in the field right now doing some work in one of our new National Marine Sanctuaries, and I'm calling in from there. So please forgive any background noise or poor internet that I might have. You can go to the next slide. And I'll start us off by kind of introducing and answering the question of what are National Marine Sanctuaries. And so our work and our mission comes from the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. This was first passed into law in 1972 and it's just recently passed its 50-year anniversary. And under this act, it authorizes the Secretary of Commerce to designate and protect, and it lists a whole kind of list of sort of criterias and topics and resources that are included in that. And really for our interests today, it's really important to flag that it is built into this for historic, cultural, archaeological resources. So the idea of historic preservation and archaeology and cultural resources is really sort of built into this act. And the second paragraph that you see there, it's also really part of our mission to not only preserve and protect these resources, but to find ways to engage the public and to actually bring the public to these places. So we really want to encourage as best we can the ability of folks to come either visit these sites, or if you're not able to get out on the water, to learn and find other resources and get information about that. You can hit the next slide. And so, yeah, under this mandate, we manage these places. Consider them kind of comparable to underwater national parks. And our National Marine Sanctuary system consists of 17 sanctuaries that are all over the country. And these sanctuaries range from, protecting and researching things such as barrier reefs in Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. We have the ironclad warship, the Monitor. We have kelp forests in Monterey Bay. We have humpback whale habitats in Hawaii. So it's really quite a diversity of marine places and resources that we help protect. And so within this system, the Maritime Heritage Program is the network of archaeologists that help support the sanctuary system. We serve as the subject matter expertise in archaeology and historic preservation. Some of the folks like myself are based out of our headquarters office, but we also have folks that are based out at some of the individual sanctuary sites. And it's very much a team effort. I'll really say everything that I talk about today is really not only work that I've done or been a part of, but it's the collective work of many folks who have really been at this for many years. And so what do we do with the Maritime Heritage Program? We kind of do a little bit of everything, I'd say, in the historic preservation field. We do a lot of work to identify new sites, which might be located in sanctuaries. So this often involves using remote sensing surveys, such as magnetometer or a side scan sonar. You can see the image there with the gray of those two shipwrecks. That's an image from a tool called a side scan sonar. That is from an archaeological site up at Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary, located right off of Cape Cod. These are two coal schooners that actually collided with each other and sunk together, so they're kind of still embedded together. We do work to study and document the sites that we are aware of within sanctuaries, and a lot of times that involves, the traditional kind of archaeological mapping and drawing. At the bottom there, you can see a picture of a former sanctuaries archaeologist, Kelly Gleason, and she is doing some documentation of a whaling ship at Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Sanctuary. We also help with conducting research. An example of that work is, you can see there an image from a recent report from the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary, and they pulled together a maritime cultural landscape assessment of the new sanctuary. Particularly a lot of this work, I'll give a nod to the ACHP. A lot of the work that we do is driven by the National Marine Sanctuaries Act, but also our responsibilities under the National Historic Preservation Act. So we help out with Section 106 reviews, and also a lot of the work that we do in inventory and monitoring of sites is related to our responsibilities under Section 110. And I would say probably most importantly, we work a lot with partners. It's really in this field, you have to find some friends to work with. And so we work with our federal partners. We work with the Coast Guard and the Navy and the Park Service. We also work very closely with state historic preservation offices. Some of our national marine sanctuaries are actually co-managed by NOAA and the state that they're within. And you can see here is a picture at the bottom left there is of myself and Jay Hagler and some other folks. So we have worked together with Diving with a Purpose, and they do really great work in training at many of our marine sanctuaries, and particularly I've seen a lot of the work that they do down at Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. And so really all of this work is quite unique. It really requires a specialized expertise and training that involves, everything from knowing the methods, scientific diving and remote sensing, and just understanding all these sort of aspects. And I think our mission is really unique in the sense that everything we work with is underwater. And so that brings us to where I am today, which is in the middle of Lake Ontario here. And this is actually one of our newest national marine sanctuaries. It was just designated in 2024. It's about 1,700 square miles of the eastern portions of Lake Ontario within U.S. waters. And as I mentioned before, this is actually one of the national marine sanctuaries that we co-manage with the state of New York. We work very closely with their state historic preservation office. And this area, it has a really deep and fascinating and interesting history. It ranges from the Haudenosaunee nations, who were the first inhabitants of this area. It served as a really significant gateway between the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Lakes. At one point, this was the frontier. And over time, this area really developed into a hub of commercial and industrial shipping. And like many of the other Great Lakes, Lake Ontario includes a collection of incredibly well-preserved wooden-hulled shipwrecks. And in many cases, these shipwrecks are preserved particularly because it's freshwater, and particularly because it's very cold. And I can confirm it is very, very cold. So you can hit the next slide. And so what we're up to on this project is we're working with a collaborative team of scientists from the University of Rhode Island. And we're testing out some new technology that you can use to document shipwrecks. And what we're working with is called a remotely operated vehicle. You can kind of see there on the left to get a sense of the size of it. And the picture on the right there is kind of showing the business end that contains a very high resolution camera. So it's a really great tool for places where maybe they're too deep to dive in, or there's sort of other reasons that you can't necessarily access the site through scuba diving or other technologies. And so this remotely operated vehicle, considered almost like an underwater drone, but you have to imagine it's still connected with a tether that connects and kind of transfers the data from the ROV to the boat where you're working or on shore or wherever. It takes quite a bit of skill, so I am definitely not flying this ROV, and we have some great folks with us who are helping to pilot these and teach us about the technology and kind of show us what we can really do with it. And we're actually right now, right this moment, actually in the middle of a dive. And if you hit the next slide, I can kind of show you a sneak preview of some of the work that we're doing. These are just two images of a shipwreck called the Philip Becker. It was a steamship that sunk in 1879 in a collision with another vessel. We were actually able to see on the image on the right, there's a little bit of the hull that you see there that's kind of poked out. And that's actually where the damage occurred from the collision. So we're able to learn about how the ship sunk, what happened to it, its history, and particularly to study its preservation. And one of the interesting technologies that we are testing out and working with, which unfortunately I don't have a sample to show you yet, is called photogrammetry. And it's a technology where you can take still images and stitch them together, and it essentially makes a 3D model. So what we're hoping to do is to leave the field in a few weeks here with enough imagery to be able to make 3D models of all of these sites. And if you'll forgive a shameless plug, we actually have some chances for folks to pop in and view the work that we're doing. We'll be doing some work on the 23rd, and you'll get to meet some of the scientists who are working here, in particular Ben Yose. He's a new archaeologist working at Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary, and he's been leading this effort. So it's pretty great. You might get to hear from him. And then if conditions and the stars permit, on the 28th, we will be showing some additional footage and kind of giving a recap of all of the things that we've learned. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say thanks. Again, it's really, really great to see the interest in this field and this topic. And I think it's important for us to think about, why do we do this kind of work? And it's a thing I don't think we should take for granted. And it's something, particularly through this type of work that uses technology like this to explore, it's really an opportunity, I think, to sort of expand our understanding of ourselves, of what we're capable of. It's just really, I really see archaeology as an opportunity to learn. The more we can learn about the past, I think the more we can learn about ourselves in the present. So again, I really appreciate the chance to chat with you all, and thanks.
Thanks so much, Willie. That was fascinating. I loved those photos of the sunken ship. That was incredible. It's so cool. All right, so we're going to move on, and we'll be taking our panelists will be taking questions at the end. So have no fear. You'll get a chance to ask them any question you want. We're going to move on now to Dr. Langley.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to jump right in because I probably have too many slides. The Maryland Maritime Archaeology Program is in its 36th year. I've had the pleasure of being involved with it for 31. And so we are one state of 9 that have specialized maritime programs. Every state should, so speak to your SHPO. You should all have a maritime office. Even if you think you don't have water, you have water. So let's just move along here. Although we're a small state, we have a lot of water. We're 20% water, and we have oops, I just dropped my notes. We have 3,200 miles of coastline because it is the world's largest estuary. We have a lot of rivers, tributaries, and the ocean coast. So we have 3,200 miles of coast. It's about 3.5% of the U.S., so very small, but being one of the early colonies, very historic. At present, we have, these are 2024 numbers, but over 1,000 underwater sites and almost 600 sites that have both terrestrial and underwater components. So lighthouses, marine railway, boatyards. We document all of the sites in the state in a system called Medusa. It's multi-layered. There are professional layers. There are public layers. And it looks like a Rorschach test because I have them all on, but you can see where the channels have been surveyed. That's the blue marking in here. I think I can use a mouse. There we go. We have National Register sites on here, architectural sites, and this is where everything in the state, whether we've found it or it's been reported by cultural resource management firms, is recorded. Our work in Maryland and survey work is based largely on the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 as amended. And it has 2 sections. Section 110, which is kind of a planning section. You own a property, or say you're an Air Force base, you survey in advance your land, your waters, and then when you want to put in a new runway, you already know where you have resources and if you have to budget to have something done to address a site that might be in the way. Private individuals also, if you are on tidal waters, either federal lands, federal money, or if you need a federal permit, you have to follow the other section, section 106. And it's called compliance archaeology. Are you complying with the law? And there are a number of state and federal agencies that look at your application. So if you want to put in a boat ramp, a pier, stone armoring or riprap, you want to do a new bulkhead, you put in an application, and it gets circled around to all of us to see if it's an area that's of concern. Would it damage a significant site? Watermen who need to maintain the channel so they can get out and make a livelihood. Larger dredging efforts, the Corps of Engineers, the Department of Natural Resources, who are here dredging old oyster shell. And I had to say, how old? Is it archaic or is it truly ancient? So we try and get out and do our survey in advance in areas where we think there is a high potential for sites or a high potential for development, so that when somebody applies to do something on their waterfront, we can streamline and give them a very quick response. If we don't know, then we have to say, well, either go ahead, but if you encounter something, you have to tell us. You have to stop and tell us, or they can pay to have a survey done. So we try and do this in advance so that we can be responsive. Willie already mentioned the side scan sonar. That's the yellow one on the left, and it has transducers on the side that send out a signal. Whatever they pick up bounces back, and it will actually give us an image. The one on the right is a cesium gas magnetometer, and it's like a big metal detector, but it also will pick up disconformities in the soil. So if you were to dig a hole and fill it in, it would pick that up. And to do our survey work, we pre-program these parallel lines to the shore. and then drive the boat up and down the lines, towing these two pieces of equipment. We also now have a sub-bottom imager, and that will penetrate the bottom so that we can, we really like it when we get a target that all three of them will pick up. One of them, we have to then look at it more closely. But I'm using two examples here. There's an obstruction and there's an actual wreck. And they both turned out to be wrecks. So the obstruction was this one. And it set off the magnetometer at 5,400 nanoteslas. 20 would be considered significant. Obviously, it's an iron-plated vessel. It turned out to be an 1878 vessel that was carrying sugar named the Oak Dean, but we were able to find it and identify it. The other one, the other wreck, is actually the USS Dispatch, and it's was a presidential yacht for 5 presidents, and I think I can't remember, starting with Harding and ending with Grover Cleveland, maybe. Anyway, I'd have to have the list, but it ran aground when it was looking for a lightship that was supposed to mark a shoal. The lightship was missing, and it actually was following the lighthouse. It sounds like a proverbial joke, but it did run aground thinking the lighthouse was a lightship. And the hot spots you see are the magnetometer picking up the boiler and picking up a cable in the forefront. It should look like this. A big dip like this, holy cow, that's something big in metal. A dipole like this, 2 points, is often something significant and cultural, so we will pay attention to those as well. We work with a lot of partners. It's the only way to go. We're small, and like every office, I'm sure you hear it from everyone, chronically understaffed, not as much money as we'd like. And we're going to be working on tightening our belts further. But we work with the Navy, National Park Service. This was actually a shipwreck that was completely exposed in December, and by March it had buried in, but we opened it up to study. It was the entire side of a two-masted schooner, starboard side. We work with Fish and Wildlife. They've called us in for finding human remains. It was a historic cottage with a cemetery eroding out in a refuge. We work with the police on various projects, sometimes training exercises, all levels, DNR police, state police, anti-terrorism strike teams, all the different police forces work with us. And I'll come back to NOAA. I'm not ignoring them, but we'll get to those in a moment. These groups are absolutely avocational. The Maritime Archaeological and Historical Society also does trainings. The Battle of the Atlantic Research and Expedition Group, they don't just stick to the Battle of the Atlantic. They've been very helpful to us on maintaining sites, deploying buoys, actually recording information. The Institute for Maritime History, all of these groups go out and do all kinds of work that really give us extra hands. In this case, this aircraft, it was a PBM that went down in the 40s into the Choptank River. IMH located it with a fish finder. This is like not even a proper side scan. They did great, did a fantastic report on it. And we were able to inform the Navy and also use this because it's a great fishing area. These are artificial reefs. Fishermen love them. But it was going to be further buried by scrap concrete from a bridge to enhance the fishing. And of course, we didn't want that. We want the plane preserved. So this was the evidence we could provide to make sure that it wasn't damaged and is still diveable today. Occasionally, I'm allowed to run away from Maryland briefly, and I was asked by Naval History and Heritage Command and NOAA, who were helping a film company, to go north to New England and try and relocate. We knew roughly where it was. The wreck of the submarine 09, a World War I sub being prepared for World War II, although the U.S. had not yet entered the war. This was before Pearl Harbor. It was in the spring, but it failed to surface. This was the day we found it, and I was loving our ROV. I really should have been hugging the pilot because, as Willie said, we don't fly them. We get Craig Bussell flew that, and he was also flying it the day they found the Titanic. So you have really good people out there, and we partner with them. Our biggest project with NOAA to date is one of the sanctuaries. The Mallows Bay Potomac River National Marine Sanctuary was the first new sanctuary in 20 years. There'd been a gap and then a revitalization. And in this gap, you can see where we are in relation to Quantico. One of the vessels was built in Quantico, but it's up in Baltimore. Within Mallows Bay proper, we have over 80 World War I era merchant marine vessels. These are steamboats, and they are averaging 265 feet long each, so very big. There are others in the sanctuary. There are some in Texas. There are some in Virginia. There are some up in Baltimore. But these are the ones in our sanctuary. And they are amazingly, they're important because scientifically, because we can study them. We're studying the microbiomes. East Carolina University, Texas A&M, all have students up here working on various projects. We're looking at the microbiome on these vessels. There's a lot of fishing in the area, both commercial and recreational, and this is the perfect nursery for these. The sanctuary is one of the few places that provides public access to the waterways. The rest of a lot of it's private land, so it provides that access. As I said, it contributes to the economy through fishing, both tourism, recreational fishing, commercial fishing. People go bird watching. It speaks to the health of the Potomac that we've gone from 5 eagle pairs to something like, we had 3 breeding eagle pairs to 7 now. And we see so it's great bird watching in the area, a lot of kayaking. And we work with the Piscataway. Maryland does not have federally recognized tribes, but 3, it's now broken into 5, but all the Piscataway tribes that live in this area are state recognized. And we have interpretive materials in Piscataway as well as English. The burning basin in the back was World War II era. So we have a lot of material. There's Civil War material to interpret in this area as well. And so we've been partnering with NOAA. Jay actually sits on the Sanctuary Advisory Council for this. We haven't worked with Diving with a Purpose as a state historic preservation office, but we do work together on this. So it's a phenomenal site. I invite you all to come kayaking up there. Come on a full moon, low tide, when you'll see more vessels. But if you have your own, you're most welcome to come anytime. There are buoys out, and waterproof maps are available for free. This is what it looked like in 1948, by the way. Remember, each of these is 265 feet long. It's very impressive. I wanted to also mention, these are some of the partners that other partners we work with. Some things you might not associate with a state historic preservation office, but in the national anthem, of course, there are the bombs bursting in air. This is the War of 1812 bombardment of Fort McHenry with mortars up and over, and in more peaceful times, of course, than Fort today. But when the dredging is done in the harbor to keep the channel open, ordnance comes up. And in many cases, I shouldn't say many, in a lot of cases, we have live ordnance. These are early Schenkel shells. There were 5 of them, and they were all live. This is a War of 1812 mortar. You can see bombs bursting. There's no fuse. We have one that's about 3 times that size, that's Civil War era, that had black powder and a fuse. Fortunately, it was inert. We were lucky. But we do study these, and there's a conservation aspect. We have a very large conservation lab in Maryland as well. But we do have to deal with Homeland Security, Corps of Engineers. When you have live ordnance in a very large public, harbor, important port, we have to involve everyone and have a protocol for these. This is off Assateague. In World War II, Wallops Island, which is now NASA, was an air base, and they would fly their test sorties up and down the beaches of what are now Assateague National Seashore and Assateague State Park and the Fish and Wildlife. And they would drop these smoke bombs, if you will, just to see if they hit their target. At the end of the war, they cleaned out, they thought, the 2 depots of these, but they're still, they turn up periodically, and we don't want tourists handling them, so we get called in, and so far they've all been inert, which is good. Something else that's not often thought of, but there is, and this is long, a programmatic agreement on protection of historic properties during emergency response under the National Oil and Hazardous Substances Pollution Contingency Plan. Wow. 1997, revised in 2002. I learned about this. The document was signed mostly by federal agencies, Department of the Interior, Department of Commerce, Agriculture, etc. But the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers also signed it. Every state can have a seat at this table, and we've been involved in our Area Contingency Planning Committee since 1999. We're the longest agency with a consistent participation. This is a full-scale prep exercise for an oil spill. There are scenarios posted. It's usually organized by the Coast Guard with the EPA or the Maryland Department of Environment. It's everybody. We have police, we have Fish and Wildlife, everybody's involved. We have scenarios that we act through. And if it's a full-scale prep exercise, which rolls around every 5 years, we will actually go out and test booming strategies. And that's where you find out that, oh, that one's not going to work. And so we know that we have to revise things. So we have played an active role in this for a long time. And it's not something everybody always goes, wow, I didn't know that. Every state should be involved in helping their either Coast Guard or EPA with these contingency plans. And these are some of the other things you may not think about. But of course, when the Ever Forward was stuck in the bay for a month, I'm sure that you all heard about that on the news a few years ago. They had to do side scan sonar to see if there was any cultural remains or other remains in the area. But you couldn't run a mag, it's an iron ship. So we had to stand by in case when they were dredging them out or trying to get them out, if there were unanticipated finds. It was a low potential area and there were not. When the Dahlia hit the Key Bridge, as I said, we do these exercises. Sometimes they're just a tabletop, but we had a full-scale prep exercise almost in the exact area the year before. So in September of 23, we had done an exercise in this area, and I was able to respond with all the data within 15 minutes when this happened. Now, that doesn't always. It might take an hour or so to find out if there's anything vulnerable in the area, but vulnerable to a spill or to the cleanup efforts to address the situation. And like everyone on the coast, we're dealing with erosion. We're dealing with sea level rise. This was the last house on Holland Island. It went down in 2010. We are finding that critters that like to eat exposed wood, like shipworm, Teredo nivalis, and a number of others, are becoming fresher water tolerant, colder water tolerant. Usually they're just in hot, saline water, but if they get into Mallows Bay, it'll be like a smorgasbord. So we're studying these sorts of things. If anyone's heard about those flesh-eating bacteria, Vibrio vulnificus is in the bay. And that is actually dictated now how we do our research. We don't dive in the hot, shallow waters. We don't dig in oyster beds in the summer. We do that in the colder water, colder weather. And in the summer, if we're going to dive, we'll do the colder, fresher water upstream and then do remote sensing in these areas that are prone to Vibrio because it can be lethal. Everyone knows our concern with metal detecting isn't major, but if someone is just digging blindly, they could be scooping through an important site. So it's something we bear in mind. We do outreach about. Magnet fishing has become tremendously popular. Again, we kind of keep an eye on it when it gets to, and this isn't Maryland, but it gets to an extent like this. It also depends where, if the area is sensitive or not, of course, but we do a lot of educational outreach. We have things like ocean acidification. I haven't seen the documents from Maryland yet, but if all the metal in Mallows Bay goes away, those vessels fall apart and lose their integrity. NOAA has documented a large number of potentially polluting wrecks. If the metal thins out and either a barrel of fuel they're carrying or their fuel tanks breach, we could have a potential polluting problem. So we pay attention to acidification in that case as well. We don't have people bringing up the submerged hardwood like they do in, say, South Carolina, but we are aware of things like that, logs that were boomed together historically and might have logging artifacts associated. So we pay attention to it. It's not always up our street right there. But to end on something kind of cool and positive, I had a student who he was actually in high school when he started out as an intern with Fish and Wildlife in Chincoteague, wanted to learn about tagging programs. And there'd been a few, not very successful, very hard to track when you have to use a backpack GPS you can't loan out to the public. With the advent of iPhones, he was able to come up with tags that can withstand ocean travel. He developed a better program that we could use. And now with iPhones, we can read QR codes, we can enter data. And as his master's thesis at the University of West Florida, through the Florida Public Archaeology Network and the National Park Service, he developed a program called STAMP, Shipwreck Tagging Archaeological Management Program. It's a multi-state program now. Maryland belongs, Virginia, Texas, North Carolina is looking into it, Delaware is looking into it, and there are a few others. And what we do is we go out and find timbers on the beach after storms, and record their data and tag them and let them keep moving. And it also tracks modern marine debris. But one of our timbers has gone 100 miles down to North Carolina. And it's a very nice citizen science, public outreach, something people can do without other than bird watching or fishing. And Assateague State Park and Assateague Island National Seashore both have our stamp kits. And in fact, tomorrow, Troy Novak and myself are going out to do 2 public workshops on how to do this and how to sign the kits out for the staff and for any public who show up. So it's something else fun you can do. It varies from state to state. Maryland and Virginia have 2 QR codes. One goes straight to Florida and tracks the movement. The other one goes to our website where we can tell you a little bit about the timber you found, where it would fit on a ship, how old it might be, things like that. So if y'all have nothing better to do and you want to come out, 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock, I think, tomorrow out at the Environmental Center at Assateague Island National Seashore. And with that, I will wind up just thanking our partners and stopping sharing so that we can hear from Jay.
Thanks so much, Susan. And if you could put that information in the chat about tomorrow.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And as Susan mentioned, our final speaker of this afternoon is Jay Hagler. And Jay, I'm going to hand it right on over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us to make this presentation. Is an honor and a pleasure to be on such a prestigious panel with Susan and Willie. We've worked a lot together in different capacities, and it is great to be here. As we start, I want to make sure that we recognize that this presentation is being made from the ancestral lands of the Anacostan tribe. We recognize the indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land, and we respect their enduring legacies and relationships with this. So, as we said, we're with Diving with a Purpose, restoring our ocean and preserving our heritage. It's very important to kind of understand kind of our mission. We are a community-focused nonprofit organization dedicated to the conservation and protection of submerged heritage resources. Now, we do this by providing education, training, certification, and field experience in the fields of maritime archaeology and ocean conservation. Now, we have a special focus on the protection, documentation, and interpretation of African slave trade shipwrecks. And so we do that. We are very proud of our accomplishments. Since 2005, we've trained over 500 maritime archaeology advocates, which includes 85 youth. One of our proudest acknowledgments and accomplishments is that in 2015, we were awarded the Chairman's Award for Historic Preservation by the ACHP. So we're really proud of that recognition, and we are excited that we continue this work. So how did we get started? Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Diving with a Purpose, members of the National Association of Black Scuba Divers were involved in a project called the Guerrero Project. Now, this was a documentary about a slave ship called Guerrero, and it's told through a book by Gail Swanson. Now, this documentary also tells the story of opposing views between treasure hunters and archaeologists and how they look at this ship and ships like this. And so based upon that inspired us to actually look and start our own organization or a partnership with the National Park Service. And so that we started this partnership in which we actually look to train and learn the basic techniques of underwater technology. Brenda Lazendorf was the park archaeologist at Biscayne National Park at the time. So what do? DWP teaches the fundamentals of underwater archaeology, and that includes shipwreck surveying, identifying artifacts, trilateration mapping, non-destructive documentation. So we do land-based training at first, and then we move into shipwreck documentation. And this is non-destructive. We do it the old school way. While technology is fabulous, and in talking with Willie and Susan, we see the side scan sonars, the magnetometers, but it's really old-fashioned, old school divers in the water actually seeing this, understanding this, documenting these things are very, very important. So that's what we teach, these basic skills. And then once you have these basic skills, you can migrate and integrate technology in your documentation process. So today, I'm going to talk about a few projects that we have done, starting with the Guerrero, the South Jose Phuket to Africa, a special project that we've been involved in both historically and currently, the Tuskegee Airmen and Catilda. Now, let's deal with and talk about the global oceanic slave trade. And as you know, this has been this was a global event. The actual, the largest forced migration in the history of humankind, and where the enduring legacies continue today. Now, and how do we deal with and how do we talk about these legacies and literally connect them to the presence? Everything has a origin story, and it's very important not only to understand the origin story, but to understand how that origin story is present in today's society. So, with that background, we talk about the search for the Guerrero. And as we said, this is a part of Diving with the Purposes origin story. And so in 2012, after 7 years of training, we started our initial search for the Guerrero in the Florida Keys. And what you see before you is actually some of the documentation, the site map that was done from this expedition. And you'll see some of the artifacts that were, documented, and some were excavated, and for the analysis. And I will say that a smoking gun was not found, so we are still looking for conclusive evidence of the Guerrero in this great state of Florida. So I would like to turn to talk about a very, very, very exciting project that we're involved in. And it is we call it Red Tails 221226, which is the Tuskegee Airmen. So, as you know, the Tuskegee Airmen was an all African American fighting group in World War II, actually, that were involved in that effort, and was the first group that eventually was a part of the integration of the U.S. Armed Forces, and specifically the United States United States Army. And what most people know is their story in Tuskegee, Alabama. But what a lot of folk do not know is that after they did their basic training in Tuskegee, Alabama, they did advanced training in the great state of Michigan, and specifically in the area of Port Huron. And where there is training, there are training accidents. So there were several training accidents in which pilots lost their lives, and their actual planes were submerged into the Great Lakes. And one particular project in which we worked with the state of Michigan and NOAA, the National Marine Sanctuary, Thunder Bay, is where, as of a plane which belonged to Second Lieutenant Frank Herman Moody. And the 44 SEB stands for, he graduated in 1944, SE single engine, and he graduated in the month of February. Now that's going to be important later on as we go through this presentation. So Lieutenant Moody actually crashed April 14th, 1944, and his plane was found April 14th, 2014, 70 years to the day of his crashing. Now, this is a picture of the principal investigator, Wayne Lasardi, and also he's the state archaeologist for the state of Michigan. He was the one that brought us together and partnered with us, asked us to partner with him, should I say, in this documentation. And this picture is of Wayne actually documenting the wing section of the plane. And if you notice how, first of all, how well preserved it is, and what Willie had talked about earlier, where in Great Lakes, in fresh water, and fresh cold water, preservation can be really, really amazing. And so, as you see the Army insignia here, still preserved 70 years to the day, and also if you look right above Wayne's uh, tablet is the running light in pristine condition. And so this documentation and find was really significant, and significant in a way to bring the memory back to everyone about these brave men and women that were involved in the war effort. Now, a part of this involvement really inspired us as an organization, and it inspired us so much that we wanted to have an effort. We realized that not everyone are scuba divers and can have the opportunity to actually see such a wonderful thing in the water in its history. So as an organization, we decided to partner with the state of Michigan and the state of Alabama and the city of Port Huron to actually do a memorial on land, and so that the public would understand more about the history and the culture and the submerged heritage resources that are just right there in their community. So we made an effort to actually raise monies in order to build a monument and a dedication center, a monument to the Tuskegee Airmen, acknowledging their sacrifices both overseas and domestically in the country. And so on August of 2021 was a dedication ceremony at the International Flag Plaza. Now, the wonderful thing about this ceremony is that, first of all, it brought people from all around the region, actually all around the country, to this site for this memorialization. And most importantly, it brought the actual Tuskegee Airmen. It was an honor to have these gentlemen, these heroes, come to the dedication and be a part of the dedication service. Now, I put up here Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson. Now, this is the quiz. Alexander Jefferson was of the class graduated in 1944, single engine SE A in January. Now, the way the nomenclature is, it's based on the year. So the year he graduated, 1944, the class, which was he was trained on single engine, and the A represents the month of the year. So it was the A through the 12th month. So as you notice, Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson graduated in January, and Second Lieutenant Frank Moody actually graduated in February. So they were classmates, and it was an honor to have Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson be at the dedication ceremony and unveil the monument. And the gentlemen that you see in blue are all represent Tuskegee Airmen. And it was an honor to be involved in bringing this to fruition. And this is an example of how history and culture can be brought into memory and made relevant to today's community and today's society, and seeing how a community can be brought together is very, very important. So we feel that, submerged cultural heritage, maritime archaeology is something that looks both, backwards in the past, the present, and brings it to the present, and then looks towards the future. And that continuum is very, 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 very important, and something that should not be lost for those who are even looking and thinking about this as a field, for those who are early career, just getting it, and for those as a reminder, those of us as a reminder that's been in this field for a while, this is one of the reasons and the purpose that we do this important work. I also think it's very, very important, and this is a picture of literally the monument there, and in a picture of Second Lieutenant Frank Moody, and most importantly, this is what the connectivity becomes extremely, extremely important, where we found the great nephew of Frank Moody, and he actually came to the ceremony. So again, linking the past to the present and looking towards the future. It's really important. And I like to say that our work continues in terms of the Tuskegee Airmen. We are in a current partnership with DPAA, which is the Defense POWMIA Accounting Agency, which is charged to go to overseas and look to repatriate remains of soldiers in foreign wars. And we are currently working with DPAA and looking for some ships, actually aircraft wreckage, should I say. And two of the wreckage are associated with Tuskegee Airmen. I do believe the project archaeologist from DPAA, Jessica Irwin, is on. So we really enjoy working with her in DPAA, and we are looking forward to continuing our work not only on this case, but for cases in the future. So in closing, DWP is more than a advocacy group or a citizen science group. We are a workforce development organization where you can come to us and get involved, learn the basics of underwater archaeology and techniques, be involved in project-based work. We are an organizational member of the American Academy of Underwater Sciences. So we do have a scientific diving program. And so that means we have the honor and the privilege to have reciprocity with different agencies. One of the things that is key to our organization, key to our success, is in our collaboration, such as the state of Michigan, such as the state of Alabama. And so we are very, very pleased and honored to be doing this work. So I'd like to make special acknowledgments to Dr. Albert Jose Jones, who is one of the directors and one of the co-founders of the National Association of Black Scuba Divers, Dr. Llewellyn, Ayana Omilali Llewellyn, who is assistant professor at Stanford University and also a current board member of DWP, Dr. Justin Donovan, Kenneth Stewart, co-founder of DWP, and Gail Carter-Patrick, who is our cartographer. Without Gail, some of this great work would not be possible. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Lynn.
Thanks so much, Jay. And I'd like to invite all of our panelists to come back on the screen. We do have some questions from the audience. And the first question that we received was, have you seen any changes to underwater preservation efforts since the pandemic?
It's hard to get the phraseology, but we've certainly seen an uptick. People were so crazy to get outside. We saw a huge uptick in kayaking when it was allowed to go outside to public parks. Mallows Bay, the land staff said the parking was amazing, that people were coming just to get out. And so we saw a lot of paddling there. Magnet fishing increased, and there's a lot of sales because you can go out and do it by yourself. So we did see an uptick that way. Hard to gauge. Fortunately, I haven't seen significant damage to sites. They aren't quite loving it to death, which is always a concern when we're encouraging people to visit sites. We don't want it overloved, but we did see an uptick in outdoor activities in Maryland anyway.
And from Diving with a Purpose, we saw a significant surge in activities, particularly in our Maritime Archaeology Field School, which is our legacy program, as well as our Ocean Conservation, which we focus on coral reef conservation and restoration. So, and again, like Susan, I think it was a combination of a couple of things. Number one, during the pandemic, where everyone's inside, not only that the need to go and do something and learn something, but also being inside, seeing all the different documentaries, all the different things. And so maritime archaeology, we were fortunate, like during the pandemic, and then just after the pandemic, we were featured in as a cover story on National Geographic, as well as a documentary. So after seeing all that, that really energized a lot of folk. And so you combine the need to get back outside and do something and get into the water, along with seeing this information while in documentary form, as well as magazines, as soon as, while during the pandemic. So we literally looked at probably about 100% increase in terms of activity, enrollment, and people just wanting to get involved.
Thanks. Now, what qualifications and steps are necessary for someone looking to pursue a career in underwater preservation? Willie, I think that I'd like to hear from you, because it sounds like all the skills you have to just to work at NOAA at all, but the specialized skills for underwater archaeology have to be incredible.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I would say, in general, most folks who practice and are employed in the field have usually a minimum in the U.S. that have graduate degrees in underwater and maritime archaeology. As far as other qualifications and specializations, there's none that I can think of as a sort of one-size-fits-all list. I think a lot of people come to the field sort of from different directions. I actually came to underwater archaeology from doing water on land. And then I realized it was more fun underwater, and I get to work with more interesting people. So I don't know.
Nope, I think Willie's having some connectivity problems. Do either of you want to chime in on qualifications and
Sure.
what someone could do if they're interested in getting into this field?
You can get into doing underwater. We want to see somebody. We would obviously you have to have at least open water to be involved at all. But to hold a permit, you need a master's degree in maritime or some related field to archaeology, anthropology, history, but you need at least a master's to hold a permit. I like to see somebody with advanced open water, but to work here, you need a dive master level, preferably rescue diver as well, which you get on the way to dive master. But we do have, for volunteers, we like to just see some experience. You can be a basic diver, but if you've done a lot of diving, that's fine. We can train you up. As I always say, it's easier to teach an archaeologist to dive than a diver to be an archaeologist, but I don't agree. Our volunteers are doing great.
And with that, at least the theme from Susan is actually, once you become a diver and, you start to gain experience, then you can go to other field schools that actually start to teach you those basics of archaeology, underwater archaeology, like DWP, and like, there are several programs that Susan is working with that does training as well. So you can start with that and then move into, get from experience from a dive standpoint, then also start to get your academic, credentials together, and then move up that way. So there are several ways to kind of get into the field. and it just depends on what the resources you do have, what support mechanisms that are around, and then ultimately, where do you want to be? I mean, do you want to be in cultural resource management, or you want to be in the museum space, or you want to be in the state historic preservation? So there are distinct areas in which you can shoot to, and then that can dictate how your road or your path there.
Right. And from the perspective of accessibility, you don't even have to be a diver. And, if you're really good at flying the ROV or running the remote sensing gear. So if someone can't dive physiologically or for other reasons, bad ears, whatever, it doesn't mean you can't be involved or do something. We always have tasks for other people with skills.
All right, thank you. We have quite a few questions, so we're going to try to move on. I want to call on Stephen Allah. Is that how you pronounce your name, Stephen? Do you want to ask your question? Just unmute yourself and come on and ask.
Hello.
Thank you. You can hear me.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about invasive species. I'm coming working at DOI, and previously I was in biological resources branch, and so I found this as well with cultural. I found this really interesting, so thank you for putting this on. But yeah, I just wanted to ask about invasive species being underwater. I've seen stories here, like we have Lake Mead, the B-29 bomber. I've heard and read about issues that they're having with the invasive mussels there, deteriorating the hull and integrity of the structure. So I just wanted to see or hear kind of your thoughts and challenges that we're dealing with throughout the country, and potentially some remedies or how we can overcome these challenges, basically. But yeah, it's just my question. Thank you.
I don't have an answer to the question, but I share the question with you. And as I mentioned, and I showed some of the images, many of the sites, most all of the sites that we're working with in the Great Lakes are covered in zebra mussels. And so my understanding is, at least in the Great Lakes, this is a sort of newish phenomenon, at least to the 20th century. So it is something that I don't know if we've wrapped our head around that yet. And I do think many of the shipwrecks offer opportunity to kind of study that. I think there's interest in understanding, what types of substrate they colonize and what types of things they feed on. So it is, yeah, I think it's a great point to bring up.
All right. Thanks, Willie. I want to ask Melissa Madrigal, could you come on and ask your question about tribal consultation?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for putting this on. We really appreciate it. My question is what are the tribal consultation requirements related to underwater archaeology and survey work?
Anything that's in compliance, we do have our compliance officers do have a protocol, because some tribes that are federally recognized do have an interest in Maryland from a ancestral times. They're not here now. Our state recognized tribes we consult with because it's the right thing to do. And they sit on our board, like at the Sanctuary Advisory Council. They sit with the governors, the governing bodies. It's the state, as in the Department of Natural Resources, the SHPO, the county, and NOAA, and they sit as governors with us. So they don't vote, but they have a say in how we set it up, and have been an integral part of it. And we try and do that wherever we can. We have the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, and it recognizes all the state tribes, but also individuals who self-designate can come through there. So we do consult as broadly as possible.
Thank you so much.
All right. There's a question in the Q&A. What does preservation look like for structures underwater? Is it just making locations and making sure the site isn't disturbed, or are there any restoration efforts and or bringing structure out of the water?
I can jump in. That's a great question, and I think it's often, many times when I talk to folks about underwater archaeology, it's the first question of, well, are you going to raise the shipwreck? That's often a question that people ask, and I think it's really a case-by-case situation. I'd say at NOAA in general, our starting point is to leave things in place. But there are cases where it may warrant recovery or some efforts to stabilize. An example I can think of is actually the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary. In the 1990s, there was a great effort to raise the gun turret from it. So it really, I think, depends on the site. But there are, I think, lots of options.
And I can continue with that. To follow up with Willie, it's absolutely a case by case basis because there's a lot of there are a lot of conditions and reasonings that you have to have in order to do an excavation, from underwater. The most importantly is that there are financial conditions because there's a preservation requirement in perpetuity. So that's where it becomes a really kind of important piece. And then the other reason is, why are we raising this particular piece of submerged material culture? And is it diagnostic? Is it so significantly diagnostic that if we do bring it up, we will learn more about this wreck? So there are many questions that you go through in order to really get to a point where there's an excavation, either partial excavation or total excavation. So as Willie said, that I guess the default position is leave it in place, and then we move up from there.
All right, thanks. We just have a few minutes more. I wanted to get a couple more questions in. This one is again from an anonymous attendee from the Q&A. How, if at all, is global warming affecting the preservation of underwater cultural resources, and what are the challenges and what's being done in the field to address these?
I can at least speak for Maritime Heritage Program and Sanctuaries. It's I guess I'm not very helpful in saying we're still waiting to see. So I think particularly for sites that like a shipwreck site that exists underwater currently, it gives an opportunity to study and to try to understand, and it's something that we've been working on, is trying to understand what are the aspects of the environment at an archaeological site that we need to begin studying and gathering information over time so that we have comparative information to look at. So it's definitely a question in our minds, but it's something I don't think we have a great answer to.
Yeah, there was a study off Florida where they found that wrecks and North Carolina, where wrecks that are very deep were actually being impacted by, and very large, ships that were being impacted by hurricanes, which we never thought. We thought they're too deep, they're not going to be moved, and they're being moved 200 feet. So, as Willie says, unfortunately, it's happening so fast. We're trying to study the most vulnerable sites first that we fear we'll lose, but we are, it's something that is still being looked at and gathering data to figure out what can we do, or is it just a salvage activity of recording what we can before we lose it.
And finally, it becomes very important when you look at certain segments of maritime archaeology, like with Diving with a Purpose. A large segment is slave ships. So these are schooners, they are wooden schooners. So now with global warming becomes, kind of a real urgency to find out as much information as possible so that a conservation plan can be developed in order to conserve these material culture that is submerged.
All right. Well, I know that we have several more questions. What I'm going to do, everyone, is I'm going to put them in an email to our panelists and see if I can get them answered for you. And when I send around the email with the recording, hopefully I'll have some answers to those questions. I want to thank our wonderful panelists. William Hoffman from NOAA, Susan Langley from Maryland, and Jay Hagler from Diving with a Purpose for their time today. We really appreciate everything, and it was just a fascinating presentation, and we really appreciate your time. And in closing, I wanted to let you know that the recording, as I said, I'll be emailing it around, but it'll be on our YouTube channel, so you can check our YouTube channel for that. And we also have a web page just for this webinar series, in which we have the recordings of all of our past webinars, and so you should check that out. I'll ask Patricia or Shayla to pop it into the chat if they can. We're having some problem copying and pasting things into our chat today. Again, I'll put that in an email. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and have a great day.